outside? Should I run and hide? How do I take my company worldwide? Do you love the law? Did you watch Hee-Haw? What's the weirdest thing that you ever saw? What's it like in court? Favorite sport? Can you help with my book report? Is my hair too long? Am I right or wrong? And do you mind if I sing along to anything? Ask Alan anything in the world.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of Ask Alan, the podcast. I'm Alan Crone, the CEO of the Crone Law Firm, and I've got a great guest today, Jessica Lotz, who is the Executive Director of Innovate Memphis, one of my favorite organizations. Jessica, welcome to the show.
Oh, thanks for having me today.
Well, let's talk a little bit about Jessica first. Tell me a little bit about your background and how you came to this great job as Executive Director for Innovate Memphis.
Sure thing. Well, I know being a native of the area, everybody wants to know what high school you graduated from. So I'm a Bartlett High graduate and grew up there for my whole childhood. I went to Rhodes College for undergraduate and then Duke University for a public policy degree for my graduate program. And, with public policy, I really kind of had the idea in my mind that I would be like in the West Wing and grabbing the blue folders and walking fast and having great quips and doing a lot of federal work. So a lot of what my classmates ended up doing and are still in DC today. But when I was interning in Washington, DC at the Government Accountability Office, I just really realized how much I missed Memphis and how I really liked local policy and urban issues to tackle in a kind of smaller environment, just because there's still a lot of impact you can have at the federal level, but you're a much smaller little cog in the machine. And I just really care a lot about the local community. So at that point, I decided to just come back and see what happened. I ended up working for Memphis City Schools, then Shelby County Schools, then Memphis Shelby County Schools for almost 12 years. And I spent about half of that time first doing project and grant management on a big Gates Foundation grant that we had on teacher effectiveness and talent management. And then the second half, I was the director of our research and performance management team with the district. So I came to Innovate Memphis this past August, and I just was really excited about the opportunity to be in a very dynamic, innovative, move fast kind of environment, and be able to look at more urban issues and things locally than just education alone. Not to say that's not a really important priority, but I'm just excited to be able to learn and do a lot more in a lot more sectors that I think can make our community a better and healthier place.
Sure. Yeah, and we're so glad you came back from DC. The federal government working in DC is great, but I think local government is really where it's at in terms of having immediate effect on people, because you're so much closer to the people than you are in DC.
Yeah, absolutely. And Memphis, I'm very much in the camp that we are a big town and not a small city, where it really, you can get a lot done by making good relationships with different community members and leaders. And there's always a easy place to find where you can have an impact if you're willing to try and try again. Yeah. Well,
tell us a little bit about Innovate Memphis. For those of folks listening or watching who aren't familiar, what's your mission and a little bit of the history of the organization?
Sure. Well, I think the history is a good place to start. We started back in 2011 as the Mayor's Innovation Delivery Team under Mayor Wharton. And Memphis was one of the first 5 cities in the country to have a Bloomberg Philanthropies founded innovation function. The whole idea with it is that in local government, really government, public sector in general, a lot of times there's not a lot of room to test new things out. A lot of times you're working on a very thin margin, both budget-wise, people, time-wise. And so a lot of civic departments, even if they see a need to do something different, or there's a type of issue that they just don't have a lot of time to tackle because they're really obligated to deliver the services they already have today as they are. The whole idea is let's have a research and development function and have a team that's just dedicated to those really sticky issues that, we need to test out a lot of new things. Not all of those things might work. We need the opportunity to have a team that can fail, but at least know that something was worth trying, but maybe didn't get the results we wanted. But at the same time, when we do try new pilots and they do work, what we work really hard to do even today is to make sure they're sustained. So if we see evidence of success, we try to take a lot of that upfront design, development, getting started implementing tool development types of processes and package them, train people up, make it easy to transition the new way of doing business. And so we've done that over the course since that time in 2011 and through 2 mayoral administrations now on a lot of different projects that can include improving EMS and 911 dispatch. We've done work with the animal shelter. We've done work with the park services, economic vitality, youth gang violence reduction. So really just a broad swath of areas depending on all the priorities that a given mayor and their administrative team might have at that time.
Can you give us an example of something that you felt like Innovate Memphis did really, really well?
Yeah, I'd say one of my favorites by far, and all this precedes me since I've only really been in office here since August, but I really think the EMS work that we partnered with the fire department on, so they were of course essential player in it as well. But one of the things when Mayor Strickland came on board that he was concerned about initially was we're having a hard time with 911 turnaround call volume, volume itself, and also just it might take 2-3 minutes sometimes to be able to answer somebody. And so if you're having a true emergency, every second counts. But a lot of what we were hearing from dispatchers was that some people were calling and they still probably have a need, but it's not a call 911, get an ambulance, go to the ER type of need. And so when that was happening, you really were taxing a lot of the emergency response resources for one, and then that's really expensive for both the city and for the patient when you think about what an ambulance ride costs and going to the ER versus other ways to do care. So we were brought in at that point to help analyze what were some of the themes of those calls where it wasn't an emergency, but somebody might still need help. Because the idea wasn't just to be able to figure that out and hang up. It was how do we get them the care they need, but also make sure these types of emergency services are just for emergencies. So with that, we were finding things like, sometimes you would have somebody that was their only way that they could figure to get transportation somewhere. I didn't have a car, so if I can get an ambulance, at least I can get somebody to help me with maybe an urgent care type of issue, but not a true emergency. And then other times we would find things like, somebody sometimes is calling 4 or 5 times a week, and they actually might have a behavioral health need and not an emergency response type of need. So once we analyzed those types of things, we worked with EMS to figure out what are other ways we could deliver services to meet these needs in the community. So one example was the fire department creating a behavioral health team that could help with those types of callers. Also having emergent or medical services like doctors and nurses get dispatched to people's homes for those less urgent but still needed care items. And then the other thing that we're actually still working on today as a result is a program called 911 Ride Choice. And with that, it's letting people call into a centralized dispatch center that's not emergency, but just for regular standard medical appointments. And that's really meant for senior citizens and people with disabilities. But they can get rides on demand for free during the normal, 9 to 5, Monday to Friday work week in order to get that type of care. And it's really helping them get to the preventative health that they need so that something doesn't become an emergency down the line. We've actually just expanded that too to be rides to resources now. So I'm excited about that because 911 Ride Choice has been about traditional medical appointments, but this now expands for the rest of this calendar year to include all kinds of social determinants of health. So you can get behavioral care, you can get access to groceries, pharmacy, recreational needs, so that your holistic health is being taken care of and transportation is not a barrier to that.
Sure, yeah, and that program, as you say, I mean, it has ripple effects, right? Because it reduces the wait time and it significantly reduced the wait time on 911 calls. Alleviates pressure on the emergency rooms for the hospitals. Mm-hmm. It reduces the cost to the public, reduces the amount of time that ambulance and drivers are on the sidelines because they have to stay at the hospital waiting for their patient to be seen. It just has a ripple effect all across the spectrum when you can find that one thing that can move the needle in so many different ways. Let me ask you this, and this is a little bit out of left field, but as you were talking about the ride the ridership on demand and so forth, which always brings me to the issue of mobility in our community.
Mhm.
You guys working on any mobility issues right now?
Yeah, transit's really been a big part of our work for a while. And I know you just spoke with Jackson McNeil from our team not too long ago, our transportation and mobility director. So that's just a quick plug, which we're about to actually plug on our socials to make sure people check out his work. But we really have tried to approach transit mobility from a lot of different angles. So mobility management would be just what I was talking about with 901, ride choices, on-demand services, finding alternatives to get people where they need to go, where they may not have their own car. But we've also done some bigger picture strategic planning work to help the city with transit before. And so Transit Vision 3.0 is a plan that we really took the lead on producing that corresponds with the city's Memphis 3.0 plan. So the Memphis 3.0 plan is all about the physical environment investments and having investments in every neighborhood and anchor sites within every neighborhood that help with improving physical infrastructure where there needed to be maintenance, but also enhancements. And then Transit Vision is corresponding with that to say, what would it take to have a really well-performing, reliable, high-frequency transit system in the Memphis area beyond what we've been able to invest in before. And so with that, you will see in that original plan a lot of recommendations around really rethinking how we do bus routing for one thing. So with it, it's, what if we really focus more on having some much more high frequency corridors like Poplar, for example, running east to west, where you can, a bus is coming every 15, 20 minutes, and then have a couple of those running north and south too. And then you have much less frequent, but by diverting resources to those central arteries, we can be more reliable, but have other bus routes that kind of spread out to the lower density parts of town and more residential parts of town. Recently, MATA did update that. And so what's really cool, I think, about where they're going now is they want to still maintain being able to invest in those high frequency routes running through the main corridors of the city, but do a lot more with an on-demand model. So not just with 901 ride choice, where we're prioritizing medical needs and a smaller population of seniors and people with disabilities, but actually having on demand for everybody that's affordable and spread to other parts of the community that haven't typically had that type of service. The biggest example today that's already active is the Groove shuttle, but that's limited to downtown, the Edge, the medical district. But a lot of people don't know, this is one of the best kept secrets in town, I think, that each ride there, it's on demand, it's $1.25 per ride. So a lot cheaper than an Uber and a really cool way to get around town. So strategic planning we have done there. And then the other big transit mobility program that we've had a focus on is around just, customer resident outreach and education. So we have a commute options program, and that's really just sharing with our community incentives, information about how to access all of these other modes of transportation beyond just me on my own in a single occupancy vehicle getting to and from work or school.
Well, I think that there's no more important issue in our community than mobility. I just think the lack of access to mobility for opportunity youth, for the elderly, for, as you say, disabled folks, everybody who can't have access to an automobile of their own. It really limits our whole community.
Yeah.
Getting to school, getting to education, vocational, TCATs, all those things, and then getting to a job in other places. I just think if I was a politician, and I'm a recovering politician, I'm not running for anything, but I've told anyone who will listen, if you will focus on mobility and change that for the better, that's the biggest impact you could have on Shelby County in this region.
Yeah, I agree. It just opens the doors for so many. And the biggest challenge that we have, I think, community-wise, is that we've been so reliant on just cars for so long that it makes it really hard for people to want to make that transition, even though it has a net positive impact on all of us. But we also got to make sure that we have the funding and the resources for transit so that it's a reliable alternative. Because if I don't feel as a community member that the bus or the other modes of transportation are coming frequently enough, or that I can rely on them to be there every day at the same time and get me to where I need to go within a reasonable amount of time, like I could with a car. That'll always be a challenge. So one other thing on the horizon we're working on is updating a white paper we did in advance of the original Transit Vision 3.0 plan, but it's really meant to say, now that we know what MATA's latest version of that plan is, how do we fund it? What are the different avenues that we could take as a community? Because it really will take more than any one entity or office. It will take county commission, city council, both mayoral administrations, and then very importantly, community advocates to say, we think this is worth doing. And when we invest, it's not just about getting point A to point B, but making sure that economic development and job access and education are more accessible throughout the whole community so that we can all rise to the occasion.
Yeah, and it has to be an equitable solution all across the spectrum. In other words, it needs to be something that, Fred Smith would want to use just like anyone else would want to use because it was a good system. And, that brings, if we're all riding the same transportation, that brings us together in a way that that riding in our own cars just doesn't. So it's a tough issue because there's class distinctions and racial distinctions associated with public transportation. And it's hard to unwind that when you talk to people so that they see a bus or see public transportation as ours, not just theirs or mine or whatever. And so it's not something that you can solve on one meeting of the city council. So I'm glad you guys are looking at it and studying it every day.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we're just happy to hopefully give everybody here a framework to work from, because I think a lot of people are willing to try something new if they see a clear roadmap for it. And because this is such a cross-cutting issue, I think that's where Innovate Memphis also ends up being kind of a benefit to the community, is that because we're always trying to incubate something and usually give it back to a parent, our babies after they're fully developed, and we see that a program is successful, we're almost always looking at, well, who would be adopting this, in a sustainable way? And so with that in mind, we're not really a territorial or competitive type of organization, because we're always trying to develop something that's going to help somebody else down the line. So we've also really enjoyed, I think, over the last few years being this intermediary in a lot of different ways. And transit's one of those areas where, we're obviously not the main provider of transit or funder of transit, but we can put our best thinking and good research and good community input and feedback through our user-based design type of approach in order for all of those different decision makers to get that same information at the same time.
Well, what's the next big effort for Innovate Memphis? What's on the horizon?
Well, probably the biggest one that I'm excited about launching this year that hasn't started in earnest yet, but actually got some really great developments with it, is we're wanting to build a civic data hub. We're calling it Data Mid-South. And people might already be familiar with a few really great resources that are out there. So the city mayor with Innovate Health launched the Office of Performance Management several years ago, but now that team is very much self-sustaining, doing great work, and they have a city data hub. And then we've also got a property hub that's already out there. The idea behind these tools is bring all of these different types of data across different service sectors or just indicators of overall community well-being into one place so that everybody can see all the same information at the same time, but it's across sectors, because the city can only really be limited to what the city collects. Today, our property hub is very focused on neighborhood condition and housing and property data. But we want to go bigger than that. So we want to keep those things up, but include other indicators of economic development, community development, public health, justice and safety. Arts and culture is an area I'm really excited about. We haven't historically kind of centralized good information there. And I feel like I'm missing, youth and education would be the other. So we're also pulling in school district data as an example. So that's something that we will make into a publicly accessible website. And we're thinking of both kind of the, give me the headline. I don't have a lot of data background, but just a few key statistics or visuals to help me understand how things are going in those different areas I mentioned. but all the way down to also having a file repository for the analysts, the researchers, and people that want to be able to do research for the public good in the area. We want all this to be kind of that one-stop shop for all those things. So just have a new employee that is leading the charge with that, who started yesterday at the time we're recording this. And we are working on bringing in some more resources, and our goal is to have about this time next year, some headline types of charts and data assets available for everybody, readily available to the public, and then build out from there.
Well, that's the name of the game in 2023, isn't it? Is data.
Yeah.
Any business or organization that's not tracking their data, understanding trends, is behind the eight ball. And I would imagine that's the same for communities.
Absolutely. And what we're really focused on with this type of asset is, there's some nonprofits here and other organizations that are really good at it. And they've also got those prior relationships with data providers to where they can get a lot of what they need pretty regularly, but it's just not guaranteed. We're still a very relationship-based town in a lot of ways. So what we want to do is break down that barrier for people that haven't historically had that type of access to this information. And that's really to help, both nonprofits of all sizes and capabilities be able to explore problems, address root causes, advocate for resources for them to deliver services aligned to all the data areas that we see a need for. But it's also for, I call it just the John Q. public, everyday citizen that doesn't always have a seat at the table for these types of discussions or decisions, to be able to advocate for themselves. So I think over time, if I'm able to look into it as that John Q. and say, hey, I'm seeing that we're not getting nearly the same amount of investment on resources to be a first-time homeowner. And I'm noticing that the next zip code over has gotten a lot more resources to do that. How do I, figure out how to get access to those same things? So we want to be able to make those types of things visible and easy to understand for everybody too.
All right, hypothetical question. You're like me, you're not running for anything.
That's correct.
let's say that for one day, you're running to be mayor of Memphis and you're going to appear in a debate with all the other candidates.
Mm-hmm.
What message would you bring to that debate that maybe the other candidates aren't going to talk about, but you think would be important?
Oh, that's a great question. And I'll be honest, I have no interest in running for political office, only because I like doing this type of work where somebody can set that big vision, and I love trying to figure out, well, how do we make it a reality, and what are the set of strategies and tactics that you use? I mean, I think that something that really appeals to me about the type of work we do is being sort of a pragmatist. I mean, you still have the big dreams, right? Because you can't be innovative without really thinking outside of the box. But I really like tethering that to what will it really look like day to day in reality. And I consider myself somebody that cares about execution almost more than any other part of it, because otherwise it just stays an idea on paper. So if I was only advocating for my personal value to the city of Memphis, I would say I think those things are really important, and having leaders on your team that believe in that too and know how to get it done is really important. I guess the other thing that I consider myself quite an optimist. I know we have our ups and downs as a city for sure, with different challenges we have and how we can get better. I think focusing on poverty and all the barriers that need to be broken down for people to get out of poverty is just the single one issue that really ties to everything else, that makes us a better city or worse off. And so I think if I was putting a platform together, anything like that, like we talked about with transportation, that's a key of making sure that people can have access to basic resources and jobs and education. I think, acknowledging how hard it can be to get to some of those basic resources if your community is disinvested, and making that really equitable and finding good incentives to build a healthy ecosystem in every part of the city is really important. And saying, the private sector might not always be able or willing to do that. And we think it's worth investing publicly where that market doesn't exist, to make sure that all those holistic things that are covered in that, our data infrastructure as well would be important.
All right. Well, Jessica, I appreciate you being on the show and sharing all the good news about Innovate Memphis. And I can tell our listeners that the work they do is unsung. It's behind the scenes, kind of by design.
Yep.
But it is truly nonpartisan, non-political, just looking for what's best for the community. Keep up the good work, because they have improved our community in more ways than many people know. Jessica, thank you for your work.
Oh, thank you for your time. It's great to be here today.
All right. Well, thank you all for watching and listening. If you enjoyed it, please give us a 5-star review, or give us a review. Share us on social media, or email this to someone who you think would enjoy it. Jessica is going to go back and make Memphis a better place. I'm going to go get some justice. So thank you all very much.